The hum of the USS Valkyrie's engines reverberated through the corridors, a steady pulse that should have been comforting, but for Captain Alexis Dalton, it only underscored the unease settling in her gut. She paced the bridge, her boots tapping against the cold metal floor with each step. Her fingers hovered over the holographic displays that flickered with incoming reports, her mind racing faster than the data. "Captain, the Krivor delegation is late," Lieutenant Harris reported, his voice tight with concern. He looked up from his console, his face pale beneath the harsh lights. Lex didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned her attention to the comms panel, watching as the seconds ticked by. The peace talks with the Krivor Empire were supposed to be humanity's breakthrough, an opportunity to end the war and open trade routes with a powerful alien faction. But nothing about the Krivor was ever simple. And nothing about this moment felt right. She took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, trying to push the rising tension down into her chest. "Initiate the protocol," she said, her voice cold but steady. "Prepare the ship for evasive maneuvers. Stand by for any communication." The lights dimmed momentarily as the ship's engines adjusted. Outside, stars streaked past, a blur of light in the vacuum of space. The Krivor warships loomed in the distance, massive, dark silhouettes that blended into the void. Lex hated how quiet everything was. Silence had always been a warning. The Krivor ambassador, General Carifax, had made it clear that the peace talks would be a test of wills. Lex had expected games, but she hadn't expected this. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong. "Captain, the Krivor ship is sending a transmission," Lieutenant Harris said, breaking the silence. Lex turned sharply, stepping toward the comms panel. "Open the channel." A low, gravelly voice filled the bridge, carrying a weight of mockery and disdain. "Captain Dalton, how predictable," Carifax's voice echoed. "I trust your people are prepared for the outcome of our discussions." "Cut the theatrics, General," Lex shot back, crossing her arms. "We came here for a negotiation, not a show. You wanted peace. You got it. Now, are you going to honor it, or are we wasting time?" There was a pause. For a moment, Lex thought the line had gone dead. Then Carifax's voice came again, this time quieter, tinged with menace. "I warned you, human. Your species does not understand what peace truly costs." The transmission cut abruptly. The crew exchanged uncertain glances. Lex's stomach twisted. She didn't need to be a seasoned military strategist to know what was coming. "All hands, prepare for battle," she ordered, her voice ringing out with authority. "Lieutenant Harris, get us moving. Evasive patterns, now." Before Harris could respond, alarms blared across the bridge, harsh and shrill. The Krivor ships, once passive observers, surged forward, their engines burning a brilliant blue as they engaged at full speed. "Captain, incoming fire!" Lieutenant Harris shouted. The first salvo of plasma missiles streaked through space, heading straight for the Valkyrie. The ship shuddered as the shields flared to life, but the impact was enough to rattle everyone inside. Lex's mind snapped into focus. Her heart rate didn't rise, she had trained for moments like this. She turned to the weapons officer. "Return fire. Target their engines. We don't need to destroy them, just disable them." "Yes, ma'am," the officer responded, fingers flying across her console. The ship rocked again, but this time, the Valkyrie's weapons retaliated, sending a barrage of energy beams toward the Krivor flagship. The ship's exterior flared as the shots hit, but the Krivor armor was formidable. The impact barely made a dent. "Shields holding, but not for long," the tactical officer warned. "Switch to evasive pattern Alpha 3. Lex ordered. She turned to Harris. "Can we jump to warp?" Harris looked at her, his face flushed with exertion. "We've got the coordinates, but the Krivor jamming system is already online. We can't get a clear lock on the jump. Then we'll have to make one." Lex gritted her teeth, eyes narrowing. She stepped forward, pacing the bridge, her mind working furiously. "Lieutenant, I want you to initiate manual override. Bring us to close range with that warship." A chorus of startled gasps filled the bridge. Harris met her gaze with wide eyes. "Captain, if we go that close, we'll be dead?" Lex finished for him, her tone deadly calm. "It's a risk I'm willing to take. Get us in position." Without another word, Harris nodded, fingers flying over the console. The Valkyrie shifted, its engines roaring as the ship closed the distance with the Krivor flagship. The tension was unbearable. Lex's hand clenched into a fist, the same hand that had once wielded a combat knife in the trenches of Earth's outer colonies. She had seen soldiers lose everything in seconds. It was why, even now, she kept the knife strapped to her side. A knife that would never fail her, no matter what. Suddenly, the comms blared again. Carathax's voice, cold as ice, cut through the bridge once more. "You still think you can win this?" he taunted. "The Valkyrie is nothing compared to the might of the Krivor Empire. We gave you this opportunity, Captain. And now you will die for your insolence." Lex's jaw tightened. "Not today," she muttered. She turned to her weapons officer. "Prepare the torpedoes. We're going in hot." The Valkyrie closed the final few kilometers between them and the Krivor flagship, and Lex felt the rush of adrenaline surge through her veins. This was a gamble. A long shot. But it was all they had. "All hands, brace for impact," she called. The Valkyrie lurched violently as they came within range. The first volley of torpedoes flew from the ship, and the space around them exploded in a dazzling array of light. Carathax's ship was thrown off course, its shields flickering under the barrage. Lex didn't wait for the confirmation. "Now," she yelled. The Valkyrie jumped to warp just as the Krivor flagship's return fire missed by a hair. The crew erupted into a mix of relief and exhaustion. But Lex's mind stayed sharp. They were still alive. And she wasn't about to let Carathax think he had one. She grabbed the comms control and opened a channel, her voice steady. "General Carathax, this is Captain Dalton. You may have won this round, but humanity isn't going anywhere. Not without a fight." The transmission crackled as Carathax's voice came through once again, the malice unmistakable. "This is far from over, human. We'll see if your species can withstand the coming storm." Lex stared out into the darkness of space, her thoughts a whirlwind. The war was far from over, and the real battle was only just beginning. The USS Valkyrie drifted in the shadow of a dying star, its engines dimming as the ship's momentum slowed. The silence on the bridge was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the life support systems. Lex stood in front of the command chair, arms crossed tightly as she stared out into the blackness of space. It was strange how peaceful it felt, despite the chaos they had narrowly escaped. The tension from the previous battle was still heavy in the air, but the fight wasn't over. "Captain," Harris said, his voice breaking the silence. "We've patched into the Krivor communications, but it's mostly static. They're still trying to re-establish their systems." Lex didn't acknowledge him right away. She couldn't stop thinking about Carathax's words, about how they were just a nuisance, a species too arrogant to understand the stakes of the game they were playing. But she had already made it clear to him that humanity wasn't going down without a fight. She wasn't about to let them be erased. "Keep working on it," Lex muttered, her voice sharp but tinged with exhaustion. She rubbed her temples as if trying to banish the headache that was creeping in. A chime sounded from Lieutenant Harris's console, and he looked up, his face pinched with worry. "Captain, we've detected another Krivor fleet, bigger than the last one. They're on an intercept course. They'll be here in less than 12 hours. Lex straightened, her gaze snapping to the map that flickered on the holotable. The Krivor fleet had mobilized faster than she could have imagined. The stakes were even higher now, one wrong move, and the Valkyrie and her crew would be wiped out. "We need a plan," Lex said, turning to face her senior officers. The bridge crew, still recovering from the last battle, looked back at her with a mixture of fatigue and readiness. "We can't outrun them," Harris said, shaking his head. "Not with their jamming tech and faster ships. If we stay here, we'll be sitting ducks. Our only hope is to strike first, but even then, We don't have the firepower to take down a fleet of that size. Then we don't need to destroy them, Lex replied, her voice steady, but filled with a quiet intensity. We just need to disrupt them. Take out their command ship and disable their ability to coordinate. She turned to the tactical officer, Lieutenant Kessler, a veteran of countless battles. Kessler, I need you to devise a plan to disable their flagship. We hit them hard and fast, take out their comms, their navigation, and their power grid. Keep them in the dark and off balance. Kessler nodded, already pulling up tactical schematics of the Krivor fleet on her console. It's risky, Captain. Their flagship is heavily armored, and getting close enough to deliver a crippling blow won't be easy. We'd have to breach their outer defenses and then hit their core systems with precision strikes. Do we have the element of surprise? Lex asked. For a few hours, maybe, Kessler replied. They're still recovering from our last engagement. If we act fast, we might be able to catch them off guard. Then we do it, Lex said firmly. No hesitation. We'll make our move at 0500 hours. I'll brief the crew in 20 minutes. As the officers dispersed to prepare for the upcoming mission, Lex stayed behind, staring at the map. The weight of command settled heavily on her shoulders. The lives of her crew, and the future of humanity, rested on her decisions. She had always been a fighter, but this was different. She had to outthink the Krivor, outmaneuver them. It wasn't just about brute strength anymore. It was about outsmarting an empire. The plan was simple: get in, disable their flagship, and get out before the rest of the fleet could respond. But the simplicity of the plan was deceptive. Every element had to go exactly as planned, or they would all be dead. There was no room for error. Hours later, the crew was assembled in the briefing room, their faces drawn with the fatigue of the previous battle. Lex stood at the front, her back straight, her demeanor calm but commanding. She knew the risks, and so did they. But they also knew what they were capable of. Listen up, Lex began, her voice cutting through the low murmur of the crew. We've got one shot at this. The Krivor fleet is coming, and they're bringing everything they've got. Our objective is to disable their flagship. Once we do that, we'll create chaos in their ranks. They won't know who to target, and that's when we make our escape. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. We're going to use their jamming tech against them. We'll get close enough to their flagship, disable their communications and navigation, and leave them stranded in the dark. Kessler and her team will handle the technical side, but I need all of you focused on the job at hand. This isn't just a mission, it's survival. A low murmur of agreement passed through the room, but Lex could see the nervousness in their eyes. They were good soldiers, but they knew how high the stakes were. They had seen their comrades fall before, and they knew they might be next. Any questions? She asked. Lieutenant Harris raised his hand. What about the rest of the fleet? If we disable the flagship, they'll retaliate. We'll be outnumbered. Lex met his gaze, her eyes unwavering. We'll be outnumbered no matter what we do, Harris. The question is whether we let them dictate the terms of the fight. We're humans, we don't wait for an invitation. We make our own fate. There was a silence before Kessler spoke. Captain, we've been tracking their fleet's movements. We've found a weak point in their formation, a blind spot in their sensor coverage. If we hit them at the right moment, we can get in without them noticing. Then it's settled, Lex said, her voice resolute. At 0500, we make our move. The Krivor think they've already won. Let's show them they've underestimated us. The night passed in a blur of preparations. The Valkyrie's crew worked through the small hours, calibrating weapons, adjusting shields, and double-checking every system. Lex sat in her quarters, alone with her thoughts. There was a gnawing feeling in her gut, a familiar sense of dread that came before every battle. It wasn't fear. She had been afraid before, but this was different. It was the knowledge that their survival depended on one shot. At exactly 0500, the Valkyrie moved into position, creeping into the blind spot Kessler had identified. The ship's engines hummed softly, almost as if it was holding its breath. Lex stood on the bridge, watching the Krivor flagship through the viewports as they closed the gap. This was it. No turning back now. Initiating attack sequence, Harris called out, his fingers moving quickly over the controls. Lex's pulse quickened as the countdown began. The Valkyrie was close enough now for the crew to feel the tension of the mission. The air seemed thick with it. The plan was in motion. The Valkyrie's engines hummed low as it hovered on the edge of the Krivor flagship's sensor range. Lex stood at the command center, her eyes narrowing as the digital map flickered with the incoming data. The countdown was ticking down, and in less than 10 minutes, they would make their move. There was no turning back now. "Status report, Lieutenant," Lex commanded, her voice steady but taut with focus. Lieutenant Harris, his fingers moving in a blur across the console, glanced up. "We're in position, Captain. All systems are green. Kessler's team is ready to initiate the comms disruption. The Krivor fleet's still unaware of our presence." Lex nodded, her jaw tightening. "Good. We hit them hard, disable their flagship systems, and then get out before the rest of their fleet can retaliate." Her crew moved in perfect unison, an unspoken trust that had been forged through years of hardship. The Valkyrie's systems were calibrated, weapons primed, shields at maximum. But there was something else, an undercurrent of tension that Lex could feel in her bones. The weight of command. The lives of every crew member rested in her hands. A single mistake could mean the difference between victory and annihilation. "Captain," Kessler's voice crackled through the comms. "We're ready on our end. Disabling their long-range communications in 5, 4, 3. Lex held her breath. The tension on the bridge was palpable, everyone waiting for the moment when their fates would be sealed. "Now!" Kessler shouted. The Valkyrie jolted as a burst of energy surged from the forward cannons, lighting up the darkness of space. It struck the Krivor flagship's comm systems, sending a cascade of sparks across the digital displays. The Krivor fleet began to react, but the flagship was momentarily blind, its communications severed. "Direct hit," Kessler confirmed. "They're down. But the flagship's shields are still up. We'll need to hit their power core next." "Noted," Lex replied, her voice cold. "Target their power grid. Full force." The crew moved as one, a well-oiled machine of synchronized action. Weapons were primed, and the Valkyrie closed the distance, now within range for a second strike. "Captain, they're powering up weapons," Harris warned, his voice strained. "If we don't act fast, we'll be in their firing range." "Take them out first," Lex snapped, her mind calculating their next move. "Target the power core. Fire on my mark." She didn't wait for a response. The Valkyrie shifted, angling its weapons directly at the flagship's core. The ship shuddered as the first salvo of concentrated fire hit its target, tearing through the outer shields and slamming into the heart of the Krivor vessel. "Direct hit. Shields are collapsing." Kessler's voice rang out. "We've crippled their power grid. They're dead in the water." A relieved murmur spread through the bridge crew, but Lex remained focused. "Stay sharp. We're not done yet." The Krivor flagship's retaliation came faster than anticipated. A series of plasma beams erupted from the flagship's remaining weapons, slashing across the Valkyrie's shields. The ship lurched under the impact, and the bridge lights flickered ominously. "Shields are holding, but barely," Harris reported, his face pale. Lex's hand instinctively went to the hilt of the combat knife at her side. She hadn't used it in years, but the comfort of knowing it was there, silent, unyielding, was something she couldn't shake. The same comfort she'd felt when fighting in the trenches, when guns failed, and survival was all that mattered. But that was a different time. This was the heart of war, space, cold and silent, and the only thing that mattered now was getting the crew out alive. "All right," she said, voice steely. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Harris, can we jump to warp?" Harris shook his head. "The Krivor jamming systems are still active, Captain. We can't lock onto a clear warp signature. We're stuck here." The weight of his words hit hard. They had no escape route. No fallback plan. They had to finish the job, and quickly. Then we finish what we started, Lex said, her eyes steely. Prepare a boarding party. We're taking the flagship. The room fell silent for a moment. The idea of boarding a ship that was still operational, despite its crippled state, was dangerous, reckless even. But Lex's decision was final. You are the captain, she continued, turning toward the crew. We'll take their command room, disable their weapons, and make sure the ship stays disabled. Once we're in, we'll have to fight our way through. We'll need a full team, Sergeant Moreau, a seasoned Marine officer, spoke up. His voice was rough, but determined. I'll organize the team, Captain. But we'll need every soldier we've got. No holding back. Get to it, Sergeant, Lex ordered. I'll be right behind you. The corridors of the Krivor flagship were eerily silent, save for the occasional flicker of damaged lights overhead. Lex's boots echoed in the hollow space as she led the charge, her Marines behind her, their rifles ready. The team moved with a practiced precision, the quiet tension mounting with each step. Move fast, she ordered, her voice low and urgent. We don't know how long we'll have before they power up again. They reached the command center after what felt like an eternity, and Lex nodded for Sergeant Moreau to breach the door. The blast doors hissed open, revealing the control room, a room filled with Krivor officers scrambling to make sense of their failing systems. Now! Lex barked. The Marines surged in, taking out the first wave of Krivor soldiers with a precision born from years of training. Lex led the charge, her hand gripping her knife as she moved toward the central console. She was a soldier first, and the knife was an extension of that identity, a reminder of the wars she had fought, and the wars she was still fighting. The Krivor officers turned, their weapons raised, but they were outmatched. In moments, the room was cleared. Lex reached the central command console, her fingers flying across the interface as she disabled the remaining Krivor systems, locking the flagship into a stasis field. Command ship is neutralized, Captain, Kessler's voice rang in over the comms. They won't be able to retaliate any longer. Lex exhaled slowly, her body still tense with adrenaline. Good work, everyone. Let's get back to the Valkyrie. We've made our mark. As the Marines filed out, the doors sliding shut behind them, Lex paused for a moment. She glanced back at the disabled Krivor ship, its heart now stilled. Humanity had struck a blow, but Lex knew better than to celebrate just yet. There was still more war to fight. But today, for the first time in a long while, humanity had shown the galaxy what it meant to survive.